she would not leave her werewolf husband. Dear Scary Stories NYC. This is a story that happened so long ago, it's hard to remember that this is all real. I was in my mid-30s when this all went down, but since I turned 70 this past summer, that means this literally happened half my lifetime ago. It feels like a story from my childhood, but obviously I was an adult when this all happened. Heck, I was even divorced already. It seems like a half-remembered dream though, because this is the story of how my sister left our family to go live with her husband, and how her husband then became a werewolf. My family were always so close in those days. We really aren't like that at all anymore. The point where it all went south was when my sister Ruthie ran off with her man. None of us had met him before when she came back from a 3-day disappearance that the police had been forced to become involved with investigating. He was huge and hairy, with one eyebrow going straight across his forehead. He was like a ruddy-skinned, black-haired young caveman. But my mother immediately seemed as charmed by him as Ruthie had been. I was back at the family home to comfort my mother because of Ruthie's disappearance, and so I found Alley-Oop the caveman to be a loathsome annoyance. He told my mother that he made his living dealing in regional live presentations, but he told me that he made his living fighting in illegal underground matches. He told me it was like a real-life fight club, but mixed with stuff that I wouldn't believe. Since these fights are for the entertainment of the elites, technology was used that the general public was not allowed to know about yet. I was looking at this monosyllabic caveman as he was describing stuff to me that I had read about in science fiction books. He was telling me what it was like to use this technology to destroy an opponent in a battle ring. I couldn't believe him, and yet this guy clearly didn't think all that up on his own, so I couldn't disbelieve him either. Anyway, the two of them went off into their new life, and we wished them well. About a month later, I got a call from my mother saying that Ruthie was in trouble again, and I needed to drop everything and come over. Here's where we finally get to the freaky part. Ruthie was crying and hysterical, claiming that Alley-Oop got bitten by a werewolf. I burst out laughing and asked her if she was willing to take a urine test to prove that she was sober. She wasn't kidding though. She said her husband had been bitten in a fight with a werewolf, and now he had become a werewolf too. They were keeping him quarantined in this location that she didn't have clearance to get into, and she told us she was in danger for even knowing as much as she knew. We all offered to help, but she told us the best thing we could do for her was to allow her to lay low with us for a while. We needed to keep our heads down and stay alive in the present moment, and then just hope that something would happen to fix things later on if we got lucky. So that's what we did. I worked from my parents' home for a while, and we all hunkered down, keeping our eyes out for trouble. We were concerned that someone might come looking to take Ruthie out. One of the people holding her husband, I mean. That isn't the way it went down, though. I couldn't sleep one night, and I sat up downstairs, listening to some soft music. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a horrible-looking pitch-black monster face out the window. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there except shadows of a tree blowing in the wind. I kept thinking I was hearing voices, too, but each time I decided that must be the wind. I chuckled to myself that my imagination was getting away from me. And then I saw it, running away from the window. I looked and I saw a hairy or furry man. He was running away from a window out onto the side of the house. I mean, if that was a man, it was wearing a fur-covered costume. And if it was not a man, well, it was sure shaped like one. I froze. This made no sense to me at first. And then I wondered, could that be what a werewolf looks like? Could that be Ruthie's husband come to claim her? Or had I seen something else like maybe an upright walking bear. I wished I had it on video so I could rewind and double check what I had actually seen. I'm sure it seems very obvious to all of you that this was the husband, and that he was looking for his wife, my sister. At the time, though, I had not ever seen a real werewolf before, and I found the idea that he had trailed Ruthie all the way to our place hard to accept. Now it seems obvious. Not only are werewolves as good at tracking people as other kinds of wolves, the guy had been to our house when he was in human form. It wasn't like it was a mystery where my parents lived. Even so, I was so prepared in my head to see human agents coming for my sister. I never entertained the real, and in retrospect obvious possibility, that the guy could have broken away from his captors and made it all the way to that house. At any rate, this guy never rang the doorbell, and in the morning, I told the others what I'd seen, expecting them to be as frightened as I was. Instead, they all seemed to want to stay up late that next night instead of me. My mother and sister most especially wanted to get a good look at this so-called monster I had reported seeing the night before. Whereas I was having trouble connecting the dots, everyone else leaped at the assumption that the creature I had seen was in fact Ruthie's husband. Both my father and I argued for caution and restraint. After all, even if it was her husband, it was not him in human form. He was an animal, and we couldn't know that it would be safe to let him into the house. It might very well have been his love for Ruthie that led him to us, but it could be his savage animal instincts that took over once we let him get too close. What if the human side of him brought him out there, but the wolf side of him tore us all to shreds out of pure instinct? As much as the women seemed certain that our caveman friend had all his human mental faculties while in the werewolf form, my father and I were more about testing each theory out step by step. We were aware that we were on new ground and that we were finding out new things every day about what a werewolf even is, outside of movie werewolves. Neither of us wanted to leap to conclusions, which is how we saw the female half of our family behaving, in our shared opinion. So that night, basically everyone stayed up, each of us stationed by a different window. When my father screeched like a cat that someone stepped on the tail of, we all knew that the monster had arrived. Dad was jumping up and down and pointing to a window screaming, "I seen it! I seen it!" Like those were the only words in the English language that he even knew. We were speaking to him, asking him questions, but he would just stare blankly, pointing at the window and saying, "I seen it," in different ways, over and over again. While we were straining to look out the window and see if the creature was still out there, Ruthie ran past all of us and out the front door. By the time we caught up to her, she was standing in front of the house, holding a huge pitch-black humanoid but clearly inhuman figure that loomed over her in terms of size, but also in terms of sheer presence. It was the caveman guy, only he had figured out a way to become even hairier than before. My mother made little cooing sounds when she saw the immense beast with his animal arms wrapped around her daughter. But my dad only started stuttering, even louder. "Animal, animal, get your paws off of her, you damn dirty dog." Dad was flipping out. I never saw him so enraged. He charged toward the couple, even as they embraced, staring into each other's eyes, as if they had no power to look away. Although running at his top speed, Dad seemed in slow motion when the dogman casually intercepted his charge and flipped him off course into some bushes. Rather than running to help her husband, Mom sighed and gushed. He never once took his eyes off Ruthie's. Dad was moaning in pain, but Mom was lost in her daughter's romantic whatever, so I had to go help Dad up. So, my sister left with that man, and we never saw her again. My mother considered that a happy ending for most of her life. But when we never, as in never, heard from Ruthie again, I'm not sure that even Mom was able to continue to tell herself that this was a happy ending. Personally, I think the two of them bought it. I think they were taken down by the same people that they were hiding from. The first rule of Werewolf Fight Club is you don't go telling your wife about Werewolf Fight Club, right? My father had another theory which he shared with me after my mom's funeral in 2019. He felt that the werewolf side of the guy took over. Sure, maybe he was all kissy-face lovey-dovey when he came back to pick her up, but each time he became the wolf, my dad felt he probably became more monster and less human. And then, Dad told me, came the day when... Blammo. I asked, Blammo? Like what, he shot her? And Dad said, no, dimwit, Blammo. One day he ate your sister for lunch and woke up with a bad case of regrets. Mom never wanted to talk about the subject in her later years, so I think she had to have known. Though we probably lost Ruthie years ago, probably right after she left. I mean, I think the two of them were gone from this plane of existence within hours or days after the last time we saw them. But I'll probably never know for sure. Still, Ruthie might show up one day and say boo. Then she'd have the last laugh on all the rest of us. If those two have in fact perished, I bet they both went together. And I say this because she would not leave her werewolf husband. The Lion-Headed Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I told my cousin Eric that I have a lion-headed dogman living behind my house, and he told me that if it has a lion head, it isn't a dogman. It's a catman. He's completely wrong, though. If it were a catman, why would I call it a dogman? I wouldn't. And that's because this is a lion-headed dogman. What I mean is that he has a lot more hair up around his head and face, and his coloring is an orangish brown. I think he really does have a canine body and head, but the big mane makes him look like a lion from some angles, and sort of like a 70s long-haired rock star from others. When he stands up on his hind legs, his chest reminds me of a bodybuilding human male. Somehow, just standing up like a human makes his wolf-like body seem much more humanoid. I will say that his feet and his paws are not normal. They seem very much larger and somehow altered of any sort of canine or feline creature. The feet seemed both longer and wider than a typical dog's hind paws. The front paws were very nearly hands, albeit hands with very long and sharp-seeming claws emerging from the ends of each digit. I've seen the creature often enough that I can picture it in my mind clearly, but I have never succeeded in getting a photo of it. I don't think it's a ghost or hallucination. I think it's physically there, so I'm certain it would photograph clearly if I got my app open in time. Sadly, I never have. I saved up and bought a game camera, which I set up to point at the area that I always witnessed it in. But then it stopped coming around altogether. I took the game cam down, and that very night, I had a new sighting. My next idea is to save up to get a faster camera, like maybe one that isn't digital, so there's no lag when I click the shutter. The thing seems to know when you're about to shoot a picture, so it just takes a step back or to the side, and then there's nothing left there to take any kind of picture of. I mean, I'm calling it a thing, but I know what it is. It's a dogman. And not the spirit of a dogman or the residual haunting of a dogman. This is a canine that walks on two legs like a man. And like the African feline that also wears a mane, this particular dogman is king of the North American jungle. Update. I noticed you didn't run my short piece about the lion-headed canine man who appears behind my house. So I went looking for him with a friend of mine named Greg. His grandfather used to be a photographer for a newspaper in the 20th century, and he let Greg bring his old camera with him. Although Greg is far from an expert, he had been shown how to use it by the grandfather, who loaded it with old-school film. I think he could only take a few shots, like 32 or 34 or something, because it was completely not digital at all. Then, we didn't have any idea if the pictures he was going to take were even good or not. He had to bring them to some place he told me about, where they messed with the film inside and somehow turned it all into photos using voodoo magic or something. He told me that camera was worth more than I was, so I wasn't allowed to touch it. We both heard something in the trees to our right, and Greg snapped off a shot of a young adult deer, who made a weird razzing sound and then ran away. My heart was racing just from seeing a deer. I wasn't sure if I was going to survive seeing a dogman up close, and I said just that to Greg. Neither of us wanted to give up, but neither of us wanted to go any further. I felt angry at myself for how scared I was, but it was unmistakably overwhelming fear. I wanted to say something, but I had to take a deep breath because I felt like if I spoke, my voice was going to break, and I didn't want Greg to know just how scared I was. I think I started to suggest that we come back the next night with a couple more people, or something to that effect, but I did not get to finish. The lion-headed dogman was a whole lot taller when you were standing on the ground looking up at him, as compared to when you're up in your second-story bedroom window looking down at him, that is. It felt like I was standing in front of Chewbacca. I felt like it was 12 or 13 feet up in the air, but that seems silly. It turns out, though, that there are polar bears that big, and I think grizzlies can get pretty tall, too. Maybe that lion-headed cave dog really was 12 feet tall. Whatever height it was way too big for us to handle, and way too savage to try to reason with. It was bellowing and making complaining noises, like it wanted to see the manager about us. I mean, he wasn't just scary. He was angry out of his mind. So furious that he was almost incoherent with hatred toward us. Both of us were running from this incredibly loud dog beast. I screamed at Greg to take a picture of it. Hearing me, he turned around, lifted the camera up, and ran straight into a big old tree that did not budge. When Greg's skull met the tree bark, there was a knocking sound, like you'd hear in a Three Stooges film. Then he fell backward, his camera landing on his soft white underbelly. I felt I had a choice in that moment. I could abandon my friend and run home to save myself, or I could get that camera off his neck and strapped around mine instead, and then take the great American cryptid photograph, an unmistakably real photo of a dogman. I chose the latter, driven by a sense of fate and an egomaniacal desire to be famous. It took a while to wrest the camera off of my friend's neck, and he almost got strangled a couple of times until I figured it out. By the time I had it in my hands, the dogman was upon me. I couldn't figure out where the video monitor was on the heavy old camera, so I just held it out in front of me and pushed the button that I had seen Greg push. The flash went off, and the dogman winced, pulling back a bit. I held the camera out at arm's length again and snapped another flash picture. The dogman seemed to really be horrified by that flash, and I think my life was saved by Greg having decided to turn it on. I started thinking that if I could get those photos made before Greg woke up, I could probably take all the credit. I didn't remember what kind of a place it was that you were supposed to take the camera to, though. Greg started moaning and waking up, and I figured, since he got up before I left, I should probably share my photos and my fame with the guy. After all, I did use his grandfather's camera. So anyway, the pictures came back blank. So anyway, there was no way I could have known that this stupid camera had a little black yarmulke over the lens of the thing. I was supposed to know that I needed to remove this pointless black cover from the lens in order for any photos to come out? Like apparently this camera doesn't know to do that itself? What a worthless piece of rubbish. I mean, if I'm ever in that same situation again, I'll just use the flashlight on my phone. Or better yet, I can use the flash camera on my phone, because that doesn't have a stupid black yarmulke covering it up and making it useless. Of course, my camera phone is really slow, and I already did try to get photos of the manimal with it from my room. I think I was telling you about that earlier. He could just move away when I started to take the shot, something he didn't seem to be able to do with the older camera, for some reason. Basically, I just went full circle and still couldn't figure out any way that I could prove to anyone that I've been seeing the Lion-Headed Dogman. Anna White, she just might send us a super thanks in the middle of the night. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Anna White, for making this episode possible. Anna was kind enough to donate $10 American to us, using our new super thanks feature located under each of our videos on YouTube. Here to explain how it all works is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.